It had been 3 years since I last saw Liam, and yet the moment I stepped into the city, it felt like the air carried pieces of him. The same humid late summer breeze, heavy with the scent of rain on hot pavement, but now with the knowledge that things wouldn't be exactly as they were. Not after this weekend. I'd come for work, at least that's what I told myself. A short conference, 2 days of lectures, and the excuse I needed to finally see him again. Liam had offered his couch without hesitation, the way he always did back in college when I'd show up at his dorm unannounced with coffee and half-baked excuses just to be around him. Walking up to his apartment building, I noticed little things I could imagine him picking out. The potted succulents in mismatched mugs by the entrance, the faint trace of sandalwood cologne that somehow drifted through the hall. I wondered if that was him or maybe his new roommate. He'd mentioned the roommate in passing over text. "Ethan's cool, you'll like him." I hadn't thought much about it at the time. But now, with my suitcase wheels clicking along the hallway tiles, I felt a prickle of something I didn't want to name. Liam opened the door with that same crooked grin that used to wreck my ability to think. He looked older now, not in a bad way. His hair was longer, his jawline sharper, but his eyes lit up exactly the same. "Alex," he said, pulling me into a hug before I could say hello. He smelled like coffee and laundry detergent, a combination I hadn't realized I'd missed. "Hey, stranger," I murmured into his shoulder before pulling back and pretending my heart wasn't racing. Inside, his apartment was warm and lived in. There were mismatched throw pillows, an open book face down on the couch, and the low hum of music from a record player in the corner. We traded small talk, easy and familiar, but underneath my words there was a quiet current of awareness, watching how he ran a hand through his hair when he laughed, noticing the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw. And then I heard footsteps from the hallway. "That's Ethan," Liam said casually, glancing toward the sound. "You'll meet him in a sec." Something told me that this trip was about to be more complicated than I'd planned. Liam and I had met during our first year of college, thrown together by the kind of chance only a university housing office could orchestrate, neighbors in the same drafty, beige-walled dorm. He was the kind of person who turned every room into a warmer one, even when he barely spoke. I was the opposite, careful, measured, someone who preferred to watch a conversation unfold before stepping in. We became friends after a midnight fire drill in November, shivering outside in thin hoodies. He'd offered me half of his blanket, joking that I'd freeze into an Alex-shaped popsicle if I didn't take it. Something about that moment stuck, how he could make kindness feel effortless. In the years after, we had our rituals. Tuesday coffee runs between classes. Trading music recommendations. A running joke about how he owed me a drink because I once saved him from a disastrous blind date by pretending to be his jealous boyfriend, an act that had gotten too easy to play. Now, sitting on his couch with a mug of tea he'd made, the way you like it, 2 sugars, right? I realized just how much those small things had mattered. "So," he said, flopping into the armchair across from me, "how's the glamorous life of Alex the conference attendee?" "Thrilling," I deadpanned. My keynote speaker quoted 3 different TED Talks in the first 10 minutes. He grinned. Plagiarism, but make it inspirational. The banter was easy, but I kept catching myself looking too long at the way his lips curved when he smiled. Every time our eyes met, there was that pause, long enough to feel like it meant something, short enough for me to convince myself it didn't. The first hint of complication came when Liam mentioned the sleeping arrangements. "So, he started, scratching the back of his neck. "Funny story. The couch pulls out, but the frame's busted. And Ethan's using the spare air mattress because his sister's crashing at his place next weekend and he's lending her his bed." I blinked. "So?" He gave me a sheepish smile. "So, you might have to take my bed. I can crash with Ethan, it's not a big deal." I waved it off. "I'm not kicking you out of your own bed, Liam." "It's fine, really?" "Or," I interrupted, smirking, "we could just share. Like adults. Remember camping freshman year? We survived one sleeping bag then." He laughed, but there was a flicker in his expression, something unguarded. "True. You did hog the blanket, though." "That's a lie and you know it." It was a small thing, but my heart had already started betraying me, imagining what it would be like to be that close to him again. Later, while he was showing me around the apartment, I caught him in one of those absent-minded gestures I'd always liked, running a hand along the spines of his books, pausing on one to smile faintly before moving on. I asked what it was. "Just a book you lent me ages ago," he said. "Didn't realize I still had it." "Guess you never returned it because you like having a piece of me around," I teased. He looked up then, holding my gaze longer than necessary. "Maybe I do." The moment lingered, too charged to be brushed off, but before I could reply, Ethan appeared in the doorway holding a grocery bag. "Hey," he said, friendly and curious, and I realized this was the other player in the weekend story. As I shook Ethan's hand, Liam's presence at my side felt both grounding and oddly protective. I didn't know why yet, but something told me the sleeping arrangements were going to be the least complicated thing about this trip. That night, the city greeted us with one of those sudden August storms. No polite drizzle, just a wall of rain that blurred streetlights and swallowed the sound of traffic. Liam had insisted we walk to his favorite Thai place for dinner, saying it was only 10 minutes. Now we were huddled under the narrow awning of a closed bookstore, drenched. "Well," I said, wiping water from my face, "your weather app sucks." My weather app said light showers. "I didn't know it meant biblical flood," Liam replied, grinning as he shook rain from his hair. Droplets clung to his eyelashes, catching the neon glow from the sign overhead. We were close, closer than I'd let myself imagine lately. His shoulder pressed against mine as people squeezed past us, our damp clothes clinging. Every time he shifted, his hand brushed mine, a static little jolt that made it hard to focus on anything but the warmth between us. "Should we make a run for it?" I asked. He glanced toward the restaurant 2 blocks away, then back at me. "Only if you're okay with arriving looking like drowned rats." "Pretty sure we already do." He laughed and, without thinking, tugged the hood of my jacket up for me. His fingers lingered just a second too long at the back of my neck, and something inside me twisted, not unpleasantly. We made it to the restaurant, but the storm didn't let up. By the time we paid the bill, the streets had transformed into shallow rivers, the rain coming down so hard it stung. "Want to grab a rideshare?" he asked. I checked my phone. Service is spotty. And look, prices are surging. I turned the screen to show him. "Guess we're walking then." The wind made the rain colder. By the time we got back to his apartment, we were both shivering. He unlocked the door, flicked on the lights, and said, "You're going to freeze. Come on." Before I could protest, he guided me toward his bedroom. "I'll grab you something dry." He tossed me a pair of sweatpants and a faded college hoodie, the one I remembered him wearing almost daily sophomore year. I changed quickly in the bathroom, the fabric soft and smelling faintly of him. When I stepped back into his room, he was toweling his hair, now wearing loose joggers and a t-shirt that clung in places from dampness. "Better?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, though my voice felt too tight in my throat. We sat on his bed, because apparently the bed-sharing plan was officially in motion. He'd propped himself against the headboard, scrolling through his phone. I tried to pretend it was fine, normal, except every shift of the mattress was a reminder that he was right there, close enough to touch. "This is weird," I blurted before I could stop myself. He glanced at me, brow raised. "What is?" "Sharing your bed." "What? We've done it before." "Yeah, but..." I trailed off because how exactly was I supposed to explain because I like you and it's torture without ruining everything? Instead, I lay back, staring at the ceiling. The rain was still heavy outside, the sound oddly intimate. He set his phone aside. "You're being quiet. That's dangerous." "Dangerous?" "Yeah. That's when you're thinking too much." He shifted, rolling onto his side to face me. One arm rested between us, his fingers tapping absently against the blanket. "What's going on in there?" I met his eyes for a moment, long enough to feel the weight of it before looking away. "Nothing important." He didn't push, but his hand brushed mine, just lightly, almost accidentally. I didn't move away. We talked for a while about the conference, about music, about a friend we'd lost touch with. Somewhere in there, the space between us seemed to shrink without either of us deciding it should. His knee bumped mine. My shoulder grazed his. And when he laughed at something I said, he rested his hand briefly on my forearm, warm and solid. It was the kind of casual touch that could mean nothing. Or everything. I wanted to close the distance. I wanted to tell him the truth, that 3 years of friendship had only made it worse, that every look, every laugh, every shared blanket had been another thread in something I couldn't untangle. But instead, I smiled and said something dumb about how bad the rain made my hair look. And he, without hesitation, reached up to brush a damp strand off my forehead, his fingers trailing just a little too slow before pulling back. It was almost nothing. But almost nothing had me wide awake that night, listening to the rain and wondering how much longer I could keep this to myself. The rain kept at it the next day, like it had decided the city needed to be scrubbed clean. We'd spent the morning inside, Liam making coffee while Ethan darted in and out, running errands. It was domestic in a way that made something ache in me, a little too easy to picture as permanent. By evening, Ethan was gone for the night, some late shift or maybe drinks with friends. It left just the two of us in the apartment, the quiet interrupted only by the hum of the fridge and the muted patter against the windows. Liam was stretched out on the couch, his head resting on the armrest, bare feet propped near my leg. We'd been watching a movie, though at some point I stopped following the plot. My attention kept drifting to the slow rhythm of his breathing, the way the light from the TV softened the lines of his face, how comfortable he looked with me here. At some point, I realized my fingers were tapping against my knee, restless. "You're fidgety," he murmured without looking away from the screen. I forced a laugh. "Just thinking." He glanced at me then, one eyebrow raised. "Dangerous again." "Why do you keep saying that?" "Because you get this look," he said, sitting up a little. "Like you're about to either confess to a crime or run away from one." I looked away, focusing on the empty mug in my hands. "Maybe it's both." The joke didn't land. Silence settled between us, heavier than before. Liam shifted to sit cross-legged, facing me fully. "Okay. What's going on?" "Nothing," I said automatically, but my voice cracked halfway through. "He noticed." Of course he noticed. "Alex." His tone was softer now, but it carried the kind of weight that made my chest feel tight. "Talk to me." I stared at the TV for a beat too long, then back at him. "If I tell you, it's going to change things. Maybe they need to change." The simplicity of that made my pulse jump. I set the mug down on the coffee table, hands suddenly restless in my lap. "We've been friends for years. You've been one of the best things in my life. And I've been trying really hard not to screw that up." He didn't move, didn't interrupt, which somehow made it harder to keep going. I thought if I kept it to myself, it would go away. But it hasn't. It's just gotten worse. And now I'm here in your space, wearing your clothes, sleeping in your bed, and it's impossible not to feel it all the time. His gaze didn't waver. "Feel what?" I laughed once, short and humorless. "You're going to make me say it, huh?" "Yeah," he said, voice low. "I am." I took a breath, trying to steady the pounding in my chest. "I like you, Liam. Not in a casual, you're my buddy way. In a way I've been trying to ignore because I didn't want to lose you." The words hung there, raw and terrifying. For a second, his expression was unreadable. My stomach dropped. Then he exhaled, almost like he'd been holding it in for just as long. "You think you've been the only one?" My head snapped up. "What?" He shifted closer, so close I could feel the heat radiating off him. "Do you know how many times I almost said something? Back in college, that night we shared the sleeping bag? Or when you showed up with coffee at 2 a.m. just to hang out? I thought I was reading too much into it. I didn't want to risk this either." I searched his face, looking for the joke, the punchline, but there wasn't one. Just honesty. My voice caught. "You like me?" "Yeah," he said simply, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I like you." It was ridiculous, but my first instinct was to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because the relief was so intense it felt like it had to spill out somehow. "You're telling me we've both been idiots this whole time?" "Apparently." His knee brushed mine. "So, what do we do about it?" The question was half a tease, half deadly serious. My brain scrambled for an answer, but my body moved first. I leaned in, not all at once, not in some cinematic lunge, but slow enough to give him time to pull away if he wanted to. He didn't. His eyes flicked to my mouth, his breath hitching just slightly. When our lips touched, it was tentative, almost testing. "A question." He answered by tilting closer, his hand finding the side of my jaw. The kiss deepened, still unhurried, but carrying years of everything we hadn't said. When we finally broke apart, we stayed close, foreheads almost touching. "This is real, right?" I asked quietly. "It's real," he said, thumb brushing lightly against my cheek. "And I'm not letting you talk yourself out of it this time." I smiled, breathless and a little dazed. "Deal." The rain was still steady outside, but it didn't sound cold anymore. For a long moment, neither of us moved. His hand was still warm against my jaw, and I could feel his breath on my lips, both of us just existing in this brand new space we'd carved out between us. "You're staring," Liam murmured. "I'm memorizing," I shot back before I could think better of it. He grinned, that crooked smile I'd known for years now laced with something softer, something that made my chest feel too full. "Dangerous habit, Alex. I might start expecting it." "You should," I said, my voice low but certain. He shifted closer on the couch until our knees were fully pressed together, his arm draped lazily along the backrest, his fingertips brushing my shoulder every so often like he couldn't help it. It was such a small thing, but my body kept reacting to every accidental graze, every flicker of his attention. "I can't believe we wasted years," he said, shaking his head. "You mean I wasted years being tortured by your friendly touches?" I teased. You're an actual menace. He laughed, leaning in just enough that I could smell the faint mix of his shampoo and the Thai food from dinner. Friendly touches? You were the one who cuddled up to me during every movie night. Only because you hogged the blanket. Sure, he said, clearly not believing me but letting me have the last word anyway. We fell into a comfortable quiet after that, our legs tangled without either of us deciding when it happened. I found myself tracing little circles on the back of his hand with my thumb, marveling at the fact that I could do this now without having to disguise it as casual. So, I said, what happens now? He glanced at me, expression shifting from playful to thoughtful. Well, I want to see where this goes. No half measures. But I also don't want to screw this up. We're good together, always have been, and I want to keep that. Me too, I said immediately. But it's not going to be like before. It can't be. That's the point, he said, giving my hand a squeeze. Before was me trying to pretend I didn't think about kissing you every other day. Every other day? I smirked. That's it. Okay, fine. Every day. We both laughed, but the honesty lingered. There was no taking this back, no sliding neatly into the friendship we'd had. And for the first time that didn't scare me, it felt like relief. We'll figure it out, I said, though part of me already knew that figuring it out would mean a lot of awkward firsts and maybe a few missteps. But Liam was still here, still close, still smiling at me like this was the easiest decision in the world. Outside, the rain had eased to a soft drizzle. The city sounded quieter, like it had been holding its breath with us and was finally letting it out. He leaned his head against mine, his voice a low murmur. You know, you're still wearing my hoodie. Guess you'll have to get used to me stealing your clothes, I said. I think I can live with that. We stayed like that, curled together on the couch, letting the newness settle in. Every so often he'd kiss my temple or I'd nudge his shoulder with mine, just to remind myself this was real. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a truth was sinking in. This wasn't the end of something good. It was the start of something better. The morning after felt different in a way I couldn't quite name, not dramatic or cinematic, just lighter. The kind of different where even pouring coffee for two felt significant. Liam was already in the kitchen, hair sticking up in several directions, wearing a t-shirt I didn't remember seeing before. He glanced over his shoulder when I walked in, his grin lazy and warm. Morning. Morning, I said, still getting used to how easy the word felt now. He slid a mug toward me. 2 sugars, right? I smirked. You've been paying attention. Always. We sat at the counter, sipping coffee in a comfortable silence. Outside, the rain from the night before had washed the streets clean, leaving everything slick and gleaming under a shy, early sun. The city felt like it was in on our secret. Halfway through my mug, Liam reached across the counter and hooked his pinky around mine. It was such a small thing, but it made my chest ache in the best way. What's that for? I asked. Promise, he said simply. For what? That we don't let this get lost in the noise. Life's going to happen. We'll get busy, we'll argue about who left the dishes, we'll forget to water the plants. But I don't want to forget this. Us. The words landed deep, quiet but steady. You've got a deal, I said, tightening my pinky around his. Later we took a walk, the air fresh and cool. The city smelled of wet concrete and blooming trees, a mix that made me feel oddly hopeful. At some point, without thinking about it, he reached for my hand. And just like the pinky promise, it wasn't grand or showy, just sure. Solid. We wandered without a real destination, stopping at a tiny bakery for croissants, lingering at street corners to watch the world go by. Every time I looked at him, he was already looking at me like he was still checking that I was really here. At one intersection we paused, waiting for the light to change. He nudged my shoulder. You know Ethan's going to figure it out the second he sees us, right? I laughed. I'm counting on it. Bet you he makes some comment about how obvious we've been. He wouldn't be wrong. The light turned green and we crossed, our steps matching without effort. Somewhere between the bakery and his apartment, the thought hit me, this was going to be complicated sometimes. But for once the idea didn't scare me. Back at the apartment, he tossed me his hoodie when I started to unzip my jacket. You're taking that home with you, he said. You're just letting me steal it? I'm letting you borrow it. Huge difference. I pulled it on, the familiar fabric settling over my shoulders. Feels permanent. Good, he said and kissed me before I could answer. The day stretched ahead of us, open and ordinary in the best possible way. And as we settled back into the couch, knees brushing, I knew this wasn't the last time I'd be here. Not just in his apartment but in this space we'd made, where friendship had finally bloomed into something more. The future didn't need to be mapped out yet. It was enough to know we'd be walking into it together.